Hey, guys, it is Allison. I am the host of your show, Allison Answers Mission Awake. I cannot wait to sit down with you today and go over how we are going to crush the mediocrity in your life that has been plaguing our society since the beginning of time. I cannot wait to have a real deal conversation that includes intelligence, fun, excitement, and real actionable steps to make a real difference in the life that you're living now and making it into something you can be damn proud of and excited to live. Sit down, put on your damn seatbelt, and get ready for the ride of your life. Hey, guys, how are you today? It is Allison from Allison Answers, and I have a very special guest. This woman right here, her name is Marie Cosgrove, and I'm going to do a little more formal thing because she has so many wonderful things about her that I can't remember off the top of my head. So I have to read it in order to, and what's on this list doesn't even count all of the amazing things that this woman does and who she is as a human. And I'm going to get into that. And Marie, you're going to kind of have to wait for me because you've created this great thing to say about you. So it's going to take a minute or two for me to tell people. So, and anything I say is in this formal way is less than who she really is as a human being, because, and I'm going to get into that. But what I want you to be prepared for before I introduce her background and what she's accomplished, what I want you to understand that is about to happen to you is that you as a human being will be transformed by hearing her story. What will happen when you are in the presence of Marie is that you will learn about resilience, and you're going to learn about that there is no situation too great, that there is no tragedy, no trauma, there is no difficulty in life that cannot be overcome. And this woman will be a catalyst for you to transforming the way you think about the difficulties in life. And this is my main reason for having her here, because she has done that for me. So Marie Cosgrove is a certified business coach and an international award-winning speaker. She's the author of Greater Fortune. Please pick up your book. I don't know why I don't have it in my hand, but that's my fault. So Greater Fortune. And what this is, it's cute because it's the entrepreneur who bought the company that fired her. Okay. Does it even say that on there? It doesn't say that on there. Okay. So these are the reviews in regard to her book. And Publishers Weekly wrote something that just captures who Marie is. That Cosgrove's story will resonate with readers looking for tips on conquering whatever obstacles they encounter. And that is just encapsulates who she is. She's a highly accomplished human being. She's a single mom of 4. And she bought the company that fired her in the corporate world, which we'll get into. She's a knack for bringing out the invaluable, the irreplaceable talent that each person brings to the workplace, to an organization. She shows people how they can have a lasting impact. She's a person who values hard work and dedication, clearly. I mean, I'm going to tell you why I know that in a minute. She has an incredible, unique perspective on life, and it has helped her to mentor thousands of people, clients, students, business leaders, moms, dads, and employees. She's and on an international scale. Marie Cosgrove, I told you it's going to take a few minutes, but Marie, the way that I met Marie and the reason that she's even here is that I went to an event where there were speakers it's like an entrepreneurial event. And I'm just hanging out. We're in Cancun, and Marie comes walking up all wet with her son and just is the delight. Down to earth, funny, just like being just such a really just cool chick. And she was just a cool mom. And I didn't even put it together. I knew she was a speaker, but I didn't really put together like who she was because she didn't carry that. She carried her humanness and her kindness and her sweetness. And that's what really took me. I felt like, oh, she's my fast friend forever. Just, I don't know why. I just felt like I could connect with her. So, speed up. I go and I'm sitting at this event and she comes on all beauteous and just blew me away. I did not know who I was in the presence of when she was all wet with her kid. So now I just want to ask Marie, thank you so much for being here. I know you're so busy. She was just on, what were you on? Fox, what? What were you on?
Yeah, Fox Radio.
Fox Radio.
So I did
She's on everything.
Yeah, I was doing, yeah.
Yeah, you're like on everything, and I didn't read it all. She's like everywhere. And she's just incredible. So what I want to ask you, Marie, would you mind sharing the great impactful story that you shared at that event that we were at, Tony Watley's event in Cancun? Would you be okay with sharing that? It gives her background and it tells you who she is, and it will change you. Are you okay with doing that?
Absolutely. So this story really impacted me a lot, and it changed the way I viewed my life. And I'm going to share this story with you because I think it'll impact you as well. So in 1969, on New Year's Day, Johnny and his wife, Frances, were traveling to Mexico. They were going to a wedding. They were traveling from a border town in South Texas. They had been driving for hours and it got dark. It started to rain and it started to thunder. And suddenly there was a sharp curve. There were no signs and there were no lights. And Johnny crashed. His daughter's head was completely crushed. Unfortunately, no one stopped to render aid. People did stop, but it was to steal. They took all of their belongings, their luggage, everything they owned. 24 hours later, finally, a Good Samaritan did stop in a pickup truck, and he picked them up and took them to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors said, "You are so lucky that your daughter is still alive." Well, her mother said, "I don't believe in luck. I believe in something much greater than luck. Why don't you do surgery to help her?" They said, "You don't understand. She's got severe bleeding in the brain. We don't have a surgeon skilled enough to do surgery. In addition, by the time someone gets here, she'll be dead. And if she's not dead, there's no way she'll survive the surgery. And if by a slight chance she does survive, she's going to be a vegetable the rest of her life. So it doesn't make any sense." Well, her mother said, "I believe in something much greater than luck. I have faith and I believe that something can be done. You're going to bring in a surgeon." And she insisted that they bring in a surgeon. So they brought in a surgeon. They performed the surgery. Her daughter survived, but she was in a coma. And months passed and they said, there's no signs of recovery. We're going to have to pull the plug. Well, her mother said, "Just give me one more day." That night, she got on her knees and she prayed and prayed. And the very next day, right when they were going to unplug her off life support, she opened her eyes and she was able to go home. Now, she had to learn how to walk, talk, and how to do everything all over again. She still had brain damage, but she was able to go home. And unfortunately, while she was recovering, because it took months to learn how to walk and talk and do all these things all over again, she was raped. The rape resulted in pregnancy. And the doctors said, "There is no way that you can carry this child to term because you're on a lot of medications, and the medications are guaranteed to cause mental disabilities, physical disabilities, and this child won't make the 9 months. And if it does make the 9 months, it's definitely going to be guaranteed to be born with all sorts of defects." But she said, "God saved my life, and I'm not going to take the life outside of me." Well, the doctors turned to her mother and they said, she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's got brain damage and she doesn't have her full mental capacity. You're going to have to sign to abort this child. And her mother said, I support her in whatever decision she makes. My faith is much greater than that. And the doctor says, you don't understand. First of all, you're going to bring in a child into the world born out of wedlock. You're going to bring in a child into poverty. The child is going to have so many defects, physical and mental, and you're too old to take care of this child, and you're not going to be able to afford the expense of taking care of this child. She looked at her daughter and she felt compassion for her daughter. And her daughter absolutely did not want to give up that pregnancy. So she looked on with compassion and she said, I will help you raise this child. However this child turns out, I will help you. And because of that one decision that she made, this child was born. And this child now works with patients that have had traumatic brain injuries. And they decided to name this child Marie. And if it wasn't for that one decision, I, Marie Cosgrove, wouldn't be here.
Now, is that a badass story or what? So, Marie, thank you for that. Tell us, was it the way that they described? What did you have to overcome to get to where you are today? And what did you learn across that path?
I learned so many lessons. One, the biggest one is faith, having faith. Now, I didn't always have faith. I struggled. I had adversity. I would hear this story growing up. And when I wrote my book, I actually did the research and I found the newspaper clippings and I found where it said I had to go to a newspaper. I went to all the newspapers in that town and I found it. It was at Torreon. I can't pronounce it, but it's a Mexican newspaper. And it talked about how they were ready to arrest my grandfather for involuntary manslaughter because they just knew she was going to die. And the priest was there to give the last rites. And so everything of that story that I shared is true. And they actually put the picture on the front page of the paper. So I remember being a little girl and seeing that newspaper and I found it. I was helping my grandmother clean up her china cabinet and it was at the bottom. And underneath there's some where they store stuff. And I said, Grandma, what's this? And I just remember seeing these pictures and she just grabbed it and started crying and I never saw it again. So I knew it existed because when I wrote my book, I had to look up, and find out all the details about it. And I interviewed family members and family members says, yeah, when she told us to get on our knees and pray all night, we prayed, but we were there not to see her open her eyes, but to bury her because we knew it was going to be a funeral. And so going back and just relying on the words of my grandparents, on faith and forgiveness, I relied on their faith to get me through tough situations in my life. So, of course, growing up with a mentally disabled single mom wasn't easy. I mean, she had schizophrenia because of all the medications she's on. And because of that, I'm a big mental health advocate. So, Allison, my heart goes out to you and I can't thank you enough for the work that you do. It is so important. And now more than ever, people need you. They need your clinic. They need your services. I just can't express enough how important your work is. But I'm a big advocate for healthcare, for mental health and non-invasive ways of treating traumatic brain injury, because I know that they exist and I know how important it is. But going back to my mother, at the time, she didn't have the technology we have today. And so she was on pharmacological treatment, which caused schizophrenia. And it caused so many problems. And so living with a mother who had schizophrenia was not easy. And I won't get into the details. I share a little bit more in my book, and I'll have another book coming that will be released in the beginning of next year, where this one's more on business and how to overcome and how to be successful in business. And I do share a little bit of my story. The other one's going to be more personal. But it is so important because I learned, I was raped when I was a teenager, and it was very traumatizing for me. And I had a hard time getting past that when that happened to me. In fact, I went through a major depression, and it was a school counselor. That's why I love counselors. It was a school counselor that helped me get back on my feet. But during that time of my life, I was living from household to household because my mother couldn't care for me. So some family would take care of me, and then they couldn't handle me. So I'd be shifted off to the next family. And so there I went, not realizing that I felt that I had no confidence and that I had no value, because I would hear some people that weren't as nice in the community say things like, you're just a bastard child and nobody's ever going to want you, and just words that were hurtful. And we tend to believe these lies that people tell us. And not having a father, going to school and seeing all the intact family. I grew up in a small town where you had a mother and a father. I mean, I was the only one that had a single mom, and kids would come to me and they would say, my mom told me I can't play with you because she's crazy. Wow. Because it was a small town and people in the community knew about her mental health issues. And that's understandable. I mean, you don't want your kid to be going to somebody's house that, someone who's not stable. I totally understand that. But from the lens of a little girl, it was painful that nobody would play with me. So I took that like there's something wrong with me. And I felt, well, maybe I'm crazy too. And maybe I am worthless and I have no value. So when the rape happened, I felt even worse. I felt that not even bleach could clean me. And for me, one of the biggest healing moments for me was my faith. And I know not everybody has the same faith, and I know that not everybody understands it. But for me, I remember it was a school counselor. And this is very weird because I went to a public school. My school counselor said, do you know Jesus Christ? And I was like, well, yeah, I've heard of Jesus Christ. But the way she said it, she said, he died on the cross for all of the pain that you've been through, the pain that you felt of what happened to you. And at this time, she hadn't pulled it out of me yet because I was just crying. And this poor counselor had so much patience because I must have been there for hours and hours. And she says, whatever pain you felt, whatever's happened to you. And then she knew the story about my mom. And she said, even the pain that your mom went through and the rape that she went through, he felt that on the cross for you, and to forgive you of all of your sins. And so that one day you can have eternal life and never have pain again. We live in a fallen world, and there's sin in this world. And because there's sin and because we have free will, people take actions that affect even the innocent. And it's no fault of your own. He loves you. And at that moment, I accepted Jesus Christ into my heart. And I am a Christian. So for me, that was a huge pivotal moment in my life. Now, I understand some people may not have that same faith and may not understand it. Like, that doesn't make sense. But even if you don't have the faith that I have, we do know this one thing. Every single one of us is so uniquely made I don't see how it's possible not even to believe in a creator, because we all have a unique fingerprint. I grew up in a time period where I started working at the age of 16 as soon as I was able to work, and they would say you're replaceable. We can replace you at any time. So I worked really, really hard so that I would shine above everybody else. But I know now that that's not true. If you're gone today, no one can replace you, because there will never be another person that's ever born again with the same fingerprint. Even your teeth, that's how they identify this lost person that was dead, and they didn't know, they couldn't find this person. And then by dental records, 20, 30 years ago, they can identify that person by their dental records. Yeah. No one will ever be born again with your DNA. It's just amazing. Even animals. I mean, I was in Cancun again, I met you, Allison, in Cancun, but I just came back from a workshop. I facilitated a workshop for personality insights. And I did a trip with my son, and we went swimming with the whales and swimming with the dolphins. And I was amazed to learn that even the dolphins, they're so unique that not a single dolphin has the same DNA. They can understand each other by their voices, because each one has a different voice. So that's how they're able to tell each other who they are within their little families. So I found that so interesting. So even if you don't have my faith, you're irreplaceable. And just remember that when you're feeling down, or you're feeling like, oh, the world's over, I shouldn't be here. No, you should be here. You were born for a purpose. There's a reason why you are here in this world, and you have a gift. You have special talents and gifts that can help so many people.
There's so many things that you just said that are so powerful, and I want to ask you about all of them, but I'm going to try and hone in. For anyone who's listening, it seems like what has come up actually quite often on the last several podcasts that I've done is people who have had moms who were mentally ill, which I think is interesting. And that's in line with, I feel like, God doing something, for me. I'm like, okay, what's happening? Maybe, a way of reaching people who have struggled with that. And I have seen so many women, even, in the practice and just throughout my years, women who have had moms who struggled with mental illness of any kind, or any kind of really strong difficulty. And they projected that feeling of shame or fear of mental illness on themselves. And it really takes such a toll on a person. And what I also just want to address is, when you were describing, even your mom having this experience happen in her life that she had zero control over, right? And then both of you being raped. Like, I feel like the innocence, the people, the innocence of the children or whatever, animals, innocence, that when they are violated, that they absorb the shame of the act, and it's what you're describing now is, we have this conversation. My hope is that whoever's listening, any shame that you've absorbed, that, an honest, open conversation can alleviate that. It's been proven scientifically that does alleviate shame when you put it out in the light without judgment. So you're experiencing shame in your childhood. And then on top of that, you're being shamed by others, judgment on top of it, which grows the shame. So the fact, what I think is just unbelievable, this is everything I 100% believe in. And I'm just going to ask you, but I just have to say this thing, that pain, we don't want pain. But when you look at human beings and you look at what, I think God sees pain differently, because there's something about pain that if you lean in, if you keep walking through it, and I do believe, having faith or believing that you're going to get, that it's happening for you and not to you, that something unbelievable comes out of that. Now, what you do with balancing, or the words, whatever you do with brain injury, Marie, I would love for you to tell us what you've done with this pain, this struggle, through your life, what you've done with it, because what you've done is resiliency, right?
Right.
Tell us about what your pain produced in you.
So having this pain, I had this desire to help people like my mother, but I didn't know how because I didn't have the education and I didn't feel that I was smart enough to become a medical doctor. So I got into healthcare, and I got into healthcare by necessity, actually, because I found myself as a single mom, domestic violence. And anyway, long story short,
You
I
say
got
that
myself
so
into this.
casually. You say that so casually. Domestic violence
Yes,
is a ramification of that shame, isn't it?
absolutely it is. And I
Mhm.
learned the hard way because, Allison, statistically, women that are in a domestic violence situation, they've been violated or they've gone through some form of trauma or some form of shame growing up. And that happened to me as well. And I didn't believe that I deserved any better. I thought that what I was getting, I deserved it. The beatings, I deserved it. I now know that's not true. And it took a lot of work to get there.
How
And
did you
it's
learn that?
still, how did I learn that?
Yeah.
I, it was a process. It wasn't something that was overnight. It was a process. And then I had to get counseling myself. And through the realization that it was a combination of my faith that I did have value, but then that post-traumatic stress and having to go to a counselor. And I didn't want to admit that I had PTSD. I thought that's like for crazy people, and I didn't want anything to do with mental illness. I didn't want that label on me because of my mom. And so when I saw my mom, I thought mental illness, I associated it with my mom and the things that she did and the experiences I had with her, which were horrific. I mean, they were so horrific. I can't even share them to this day. That's how bad they were. But associating mental illness with that, I just felt, no, not me. I didn't want to admit that. And then realizing that I did have PTSD and that I had to do the work and go through that really helped me. And and also sharing my experiences like I am with you helped me as well. Being able to talk about it. You mentioned, Allison, earlier how talking helps. It certainly does. I remember the first time I was asked to talk about how I bought the company that fired me. And I had a dream. And in my dream, God said, "This isn't your story. This is your story." And I'm like, holy smokes, I woke up and I called one of my aunts. I said, "I'm going to share this story." She goes, "No, you're not, because it's a family secret. We try to keep it hush hush as much as you can." But when I did, it was like a load of bricks lifted off my shoulders. And now, like you asked me earlier, can I ask you these questions or can you share this? I'm an open book now because I know, like you mentioned, this pain, it's almost like burning all of the things out of us that we don't need in our lives to bring us this renewal to who we need to become. And you were created for a purpose. And sometimes all of that stuff needs to be burnt out of you. And sometimes it comes through pain, sadly. But that's what has helped me. You can help it. I mean, you can use pain to, it can snap you when you're faced with pressure, or you can become more resilient through that pain.
Yes. And that message right there that you're giving, like, I'm not sure if you're realizing it as you're saying it, but you're transforming lives in this conversation. Because even when you said, Allison, there's things that I can't even say because of how horrific they were. And what I just want to shout out to anyone who's listening, I mean, I had a really hard childhood too, and a lot of shame. So the thing that happens when our words won't come, when we've lost our voice because of shame, that I just want to say to people that when someone has earned the right to hear your story, when someone has earned the right to be a person who holds space with empathy and love as you share something in the light, that's when, and they do studies on it, which is weird, that like 80% of shame dissipates. When you have that gag
Wow.
order that you can't talk, that means that there's shame in your neck. It's like almost at your throat. And it feels like if you say it, you know, because it's an emotion that's buried alive. And it's that if I say it, then it will expose what's wrong with me because of what happened to me. And that's the, you know, I try to tell people who had moms or whoever, and anybody who is abused in any way by somebody that they love so much. And the thing about it is that it's this feeling that as a daughter, your role as a daughter is almost taken from you. Like you don't have that role because you can't be in that role because they're not able to interact with you in that way. Right. So it's like, there's so many things that you're saying. I just wanted to say it out loud to people that, you know, and the other thing is that our brains, when we tell a story is structured in our brain in a certain way. When we share it in the context of love and acceptance, the story is felt, and now a different emotion is attached to that story when it's told again. So it becomes reframed in our brain. So the story can actually transmute over time the more we tell it, because then you're bringing emotion in that's a different type of emotion, because everything already happened, but we keep the emotion from the time that it happened buried. So I just want people to hear that, like, that it's so good to, and not just with anybody who's going to, like, you know, not some schlep in the street you tell your story to, or an abusive boyfriend. No. Right. So I'm sorry, I totally kind of interrupted in a way, but I just wanted to share that aspect because your vulnerability is beautiful and it's very helpful to people. I just want to make sure you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you were saying about, like, what do you think these, like, you know, talk about the fire, you know, like going through the fire and it burning out of you. What did you create from these struggles? I know a lot.
So I was working for this company, which I did some research, and it was an amazing company, and they had gotten their FDA clearance, and it's called Balance Back. And what they did is they developed devices to help diagnose CNS disorders, anything traumatic brain injury, concussion, anything to do with the central nervous system, and balance, because everything's connected. Your head, your vestibular system, your inner ear, your nose, your eyes, and all of that. I won't get into the details on it because it's very niche, but then they also had a product that treated as well. So I was so passionate about this company, and I share the details in my book. But one of the things that happened was I became one of the top representatives in this company, and I had sold some very prestigious universities. And what I loved about it is it was developed by the top scientists, the top clinicians in the world. And what was so beautiful about it was that the military loved it. And the studies came out, you know, with all these amazing results. So that's why I did very well, because of my mom. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I can provide this to doctors and clinicians, and then they can help their patients. And then I would hear stories. Oh, after this patient did therapy, this patient that had MS was in a wheelchair, is no longer in a wheelchair. And I was just amazed. Well, I got a call one day, and one of the VPs says, I want to talk to you, and we're really happy with the work that you're doing. And I had just closed Baylor University and University of Texas. I was like, woohoo, you know, I'm getting a promotion, or I'm getting, you know, something, right? So we had a dinner, and I called all my friends, and I'm like, oh, guess what? I'm having dinner. They flew in just to have dinner with me. And it's because I'm doing so well. So I'm like super duper excited. And then we're having dinner, and he's praising me. So I'm thinking I'm going to get this huge position, maybe even, you know, maybe they're going to offer me ownership in the company or something, right? And he passes over a sheet of paper across the table. So I'm really excited, and I have this big smile on my face, and I look at it, and I saw that it was a horrible, horrible situation for me. So what they were offering me seemed like a great opportunity, but they were offering me a salary of what I was making on a monthly basis on commission. So I said, you know what? I think I'll stay with, the situation I'm in now. The financial arrangements we have now are fine for me. I'll just stick with that. They said, you don't understand. You can't. You don't have a choice. This is not a choice. You take this offer or you don't work for us. Well, what they were offering me, and my kids, you met my youngest, but my older kids were little at the time, and they're already adults out of the house. But at the time they were little, and I would have to travel with all of them. Now I just travel with the one. I would have to travel with all of them and a nanny. And so you multiply that 1 times 4, it's a lot, right? So I couldn't afford $150,000 a year salary to fly a nanny, 4 kids, and travel all across the country. I just couldn't afford to do that. So if I accepted that offer, I would go bankrupt. And so I said no. And they said, well, then you can't sell for us. And in fact, you can't even do the training for the 2 universities that you sold. And so I was devastated. And of course it hurts. And, we're talking about pain. Pain hurts. And I remembered the words of my grandfather, forgiveness. And he says, vengeance doesn't belong to us. It belongs to the Lord. And sometimes you don't understand. You're like, why? I mean, this doesn't seem fair. I'm doing a good job. And this is the payback that I get, for doing something good. I get penalized for it. And sometimes the world works that way. And it's, again, free will. These people, that was their choice. And they didn't understand why I did so well in sales. They said, the reason you're doing well is because it's a great product. It's the best product out on the market. And that's why you're doing well. We don't need you. So why should we continue to pay you what we're paying you? So that's how they saw it. And they didn't know what I was going through at home. They didn't know the financial burden they were going to put on me again after working so hard to get this position. And then on top of that, they didn't understand my passion behind why I was doing so well in sales. So I went to one of my friends, Dr. Martin, who's my hero. And every one of you have a hero. Whether it's, even from afar, even if you've never met Allison and you're just listening to her podcast, she can be your hero or a friend or someone. And so you need to surround yourself with people that support you. And sometimes when we have this shame and we have this negative mindset, we tend to gravitate to people like that.
Yes.
No, gravitate to people that have what you want, that happiness, that want to support you. So I went to Dr. Martin and I'm crying and I'm like, oh, this is the worst day. And he's like, this is the best day. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Are you lost your mind? I'm like, my kids, I'm going to support them. And my kids had to go through counseling because of domestic violence. They had their own PTSD that they had to go through. And he said, start your own company. Well, anyway, I started my own company. And within 2 years, I scaled it to be able to buy the company that fired me. And that was over a decade ago. So we're still the leader in our industry. And that's what drives me. That's my passion. And even when there's moments, because it's not easy running a business, definitely it's hard, and manufacturing is hard, especially when you've got all the regulatory requirements with FDA, because it's an FDA cleared device. It's definitely not easy. But that's the passion that drives me, is when I meet with a neurologist and they tell me, look at what your system has done for my patients. When I hear even Dr. Martin, who shared with me recently about an 80-some-year-old grandmother who was in a car accident and she wanted to continue working. She was still working. She didn't want to retire. She loved work. And they didn't want her to because of this accident. And he was able to rehab her back to where she was prior to the accident, and she's working again. And so that just fills me with joy. And it's because of my mom, and it's that pain that I went through. I don't ever want anybody to go through that. If if there's a solution and I can be a part of that, that's what makes me happy. And so that's another lesson that I learned about resiliency is, well, we talked about faith. We talked about forgiveness. Another one is, how can you help somebody else? And it's so interesting when you stop focusing on your problems and your shame and your pain, and you start seeking ways, how can I help somebody? Then all of a sudden, all of your pain dissipates because you're focused on helping somebody else. And then your heart starts to fill with joy. It's just so interesting how it works that way. But I found that, and Allison, I'm sure you've read the studies on how that is so true. When you serve others, the joy that they receive is not as big as the joy you receive back.
100%. Yes. You know, and these things that you're describing, like, I feel like when any of us go through an unbelievable struggle, what you've done is like that pain allowed you into the land, you know, where those different struggles are, the land of, you know, having a mom who wasn't well, or, you know, and it gives you like an authority. It's like an authority that you now can, you can like I always picture putting a stake in the ground of that area. Like, I own that land. I understand it. Therefore, I can, you know, I'm going to command that land. And I feel like you do that. Like, I always see it when I see the stake in the ground, what I see is a cross in the ground. Like, I'm taking over this land. I have been introduced to it because I lived in it, you know, and that, you know, there's no, like, anything, you know, I used to feel like, oh my God, you know, why God, why all these different things in my life? Like, you could look at your life and be like, why, how did this doesn't seem fair. But when you look at the results of, I think about any one of those people that you've helped, one of them could be just like that one person, that school counselor that helped you. It can be, the results can be exponential. Because look, I wonder if that school counselor knows where you are now.
I don't know. I just met her like twice, and then she never came back. And I just felt, yeah, I wish, I don't even remember her name. It's so sad. I remember her face. I remember everything, her face, her words, everything. But I know that there's a big reward for her in heaven for how she helped me.
Would you see that? Like that now, we don't know if you were the only person she did that with. She may have done it with tons, but let's say she just one. Now, if you look at the trail of people behind you that she has helped by just touching your heart. And that's why I think us remembering that, like, oh, you know what, you know, I try to, like, wherever I go, I say, I want to add value here. Cashier, doesn't matter. Because we could be, that one person is worth it, right?
Absolutely. Your words matter. Every word that you utter towards someone matters and makes a huge difference. You know, even Dr. Martin, this is the best day of your life. You know, that one statement, he never gave me money. He never gave me anything.
I want to know why not. But anyhow,
but it was his support, his words, you know, that made the difference. Or my grandmother with just standing tall and saying, you know what, because I don't know, her faith was just phenomenal, because most of us, we like, okay, well, that's what they said. Well, that's what we have to do. But she was like, no, I have faith. And she wouldn't let go of her faith. So I think that's, you know, so powerful. And sometimes even unanswered prayer, you know, because my grandmother wanted to see my mother healed. She wanted to see her healed. And it was this unanswered prayer for her. But yet, had she been healed, I don't know that would have had the passion that I have today for what I do.
Exactly.
And it's just amazing how God can use this adversity, because we live in a sinful world. We live in a world where there's free will, and you know, our God is not a dictator to force us to fall in line and force us to be good and to do good. That we all experience good things and we all experience bad things. But when you're resilient and you have that faith, you have that forgiveness, when you're able to persevere, you're able to adapt to changes in your life, you're able to overcome and be resilient.
You know, and if you think, Marie, like, what's the alternative?
Right.
Like, the thing is, like, you took what was, you know, you just kept going, and you made something great out of, you know, the scripture I love, you know, what the enemy uses for evil, God uses for good.
Yes.
And it's a matter of just being willing to do that, like being able to see, like, like our mindset. Okay, I always think, like, okay, how is this happening for me? There's a reason for that. That's what that man saw. Doctor Who, Martin?
Yes.
I'm gonna go hit him up for some money. Actually, Dr. Martin. I'm just kidding.
He's awesome.
I'm just kidding. But anyhow, so, like, you know, he saw you. He saw you know, your future. And like, I feel like that's what, like, you're doing for other people. You're saying you're a snowflake. You're, you know, you're uniquely, you know, and wonderfully made, right? It's just like fearlessly and wonderfully made. Like, we are so unique, and we have power within us that we don't realize. I always say the thing, which you probably heard it, you know, in the streets of the church, you know, it's like, wait a minute, beggars plead, servants ask, and children command. And when you have the authority, like this, well, that would come with faith. Like your grandmother's like, oh, no. Because when you have like a lion backing you up, you know, you can say, no, we're not doing that. I know what we're doing. Do you know that neurologically they've found the source of that, which I think is just incredible?
Really?
I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try not to. This is so cool, Marie. That they found that the unconscious mind, right? That the concept, whatever's in there, like the core belief, let's say that's like really, I can never do this, right? And then when you do the affirmation that says, you can do this, or you're beautiful, and underneath it's like, I suck. But they said that there's something in the brain that when somebody has faith and believes in God, that overrides that shutting down between the two, the unconscious and the conscious mind, because that faith right there makes the affirmation possible, because it overrides all other unconscious beliefs that are negative. Isn't that incredible?
That is incredible. That's amazing. Wow.
Yes. So tell us, when we're having this conversation, like, what pops up for you? I want to be respectful of your time. I haven't even looked, because I know we're probably over time. So tell me, what is it that what gem, like, what made you, if you were to say to somebody who's like really has a low self-esteem right now, who's in a really hard time, what would you say are 3 things that they could do or not do?
I would say, know that you have value, and it's a day by day thing. You have to take it day by day, because sometimes we look at, oh, am I ever going to get better? Or am I ever going to feel better? You just become overwhelmed. Today, where are you right now? You know, are you okay right now where you are? And appreciate who you are. One of the things that you can do is write down 10 things that you are good at, 10 gifts that God's given you that you are good at, or that you were born with. Because if you don't believe in God, you were gifted. Scientifically, we know that there is no other person like you. There are gifts that you have, and you might start off with 3, and it doesn't have to be fancy. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Don't compare your gifts to your best friends or anybody else's. Just what you're good at, that you know that you're good at. Start with 3, then go on down the list, do 3 more, and then 3 more. Just keep going until you have 10 or more. And then look at that list. How can you use that, your gift, your purpose, your value? You have value and you matter. And those gifts that you're gifted with, how can you use those to help somebody else? So let's say you're great with kids. Hey, why don't you help the next door neighbor? Hey, can I babysit for you? Your sister, your cousin, it's somebody, say you're good at baking. There's a lady down the street. She's not feeling well. Why don't you go bake her something, make her a pie, and you'll see how your life will begin to change. So number one is write down 10 things that you're good at. Two is how can you use your gifts to serve somebody else, to make the world a better place? And then the next thing is forgiveness, because it's hard. I know the pain that you've gone through. I don't know. I know the pain that I went through. It was so hard to be able to forgive. You can forgive. And I'm sure, Allison, you've talked about this, that it is for you, not that person. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you have no pain. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you'll forget and it'll be erased from your memory. That's why you have counselors, you have professionals to help you with that, like Allison. But if for me, when I had a hard time forgiving, I just turned it to God. I said, God, I can't forgive. I have so much hate in my heart that I need your help. And God softened my heart to be able to forgive. And so those three things will help you so much. And then get professional help. And if you're going through a situation where self-harm or anything, you definitely get to a professional.
Yes, absolutely. And just in regard to the thing with forgiveness, what I started doing recently is I walk every day, walk my dogs, and I started coupling together forgiveness with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
So anything, it's funny because almost like making it just a practice. So like, let's say just something got on my nerves, or I got on my own nerves, or it could be the littlest, dumbest thing, but I just started checking my body and noticing anything that was burdening me. And then I would forgive people, places, and things, including myself, including God, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, this is like flushing a toilet, for God's sakes. I can't believe like this actually works. It's like canceling the debt. When we feel badly about something, it's like we somebody or something owes us something. And we're just never free, because until that happens, an external thing changes, we're expecting an external thing to change our emotional state. And it's just, we can wait a really long time for that shenanigans, right?
Right.
So listen, thank you so much for being here. Do you have anything that you just want to say? I don't want to cut you off but I want to be respectful of your time. So is anything that you still want to say or that's important to you?
Sure. If you want to get my book, you can get it on Amazon. Greater Fortune: Essential Lessons from the Entrepreneur Who Bought the Company That Fired Her. You can go to my website, mariecosgrove.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook at Resilient Expert. So you'll find me at Resilient Expert. And if I can help you in any way, I look forward to connecting.
That's wonderful. Let me ask you something. So do you do like coaching? Like I saw that you're probably too big now to do any of that individual stuff, but I just wanted to throw it out there if you do.
I do coaching, I do business consulting, and I do speaking. So I don't take on everybody. And if, I strongly believe that if you're going to get coached, you get coached by the right person, someone who has had the experiences you're going through, because they've walked the walk, they can help you. And if it's a situation where it's like serious trauma, you need to get help from a professional like Allison, or sometimes it's just stress or anxiety that all of us go through. And you need like a life coach, or, I'm a certified coach. I'm a certified human behavioral therapist. So I could help with that, but definitely find someone that can help you. And I've turned down so many people too, because that's not my expertise. So I will always send you to, someone who could better serve you. And I think that is so important.
Yeah. And also as a business consultant, what do? Do you go into companies? What is that? I just love.
So what I do is I go to companies, I evaluate their processes. I work on collaboration, because when I bought Balance Back, for example, the different departments were not communicating with each other. Now we have a great collaborative environment. I work on sales, go in and I do their training on their sales. The last company I did training for, their sales went up by 25% just within the first workshop that we did. So that's what I like to do. I like to grow companies, help scale them. So I do consulting on the marketing front, sales front, and just the overall business to take a look at where you are, where do you want to go, where do you want to take your business to? Do you want to sell it? Do you want to take it to the next level? You know, what are your goals to help you get there? Because I've done that. I've started companies from scratch, got FDA clearance on my own, sold companies, bought companies. So I've got experience in that area.
Has anyone told you lately that you're a badass?
Thank you.
You're like a resilient, humble, love bug badass. I don't even know. It's like such a great combination of a human being. I want to thank you so much for being here. It's just such an honor to have you. I really, really mean that.
Thank you.
It means so much to me. I know that you've helped a lot of people today. And it's a stream that I have going on here that people are, a lot of people, for some reason, the podcast have been about, the things that we talked about. So I feel like it's in line with whatever God is doing. Domestic violence. I've had almost 3 people just serendipitously be on about that, and child abuse, and just a lot, mental illness. So I appreciate you a lot. I want to thank you.
Thank you. Honored to be here with you.
Thank you.